Disclaimer: this video features a medically supervised sleep deprivation experiment in which all measures were taken to protect the participants' health. This video is for entertainment purposes and should not serve as an instruction guide or endorsement of any individual replicating these behaviours. Do not try this at home. Sleep. I would say it's fairly important. You're probably familiar with it. Big part of your overall existence here on Earth is spent sleeping. But what happens if we just don't do it? Well, in 1963, a 17-year-old American named Randy Gardner decided that he would forego his 40 winks to see what would happen. And he lasted 264 hours. That's over 11 days. On his final day of sleep deprivation, he conducted a press conference, and when asked why he did this, he simply said he wanted to prove that nothing bad would happen if you went without sleep. But was that really the case? For example, on his 11th day of sleep deprivation, he was asked to subtract 7 continually from 100, and he stopped at 65. When asked why he had stopped at 65, he replied that it was because he had forgotten what he was doing. Now, most of us have pulled the occasional all-nighter, and we've probably been more or less fine. But how much does short-term sleep deprivation actually affect us?
Welcome back to the Integration Corner, everyone's unofficial favourite corner of the internet. Is it actually a corner? Absolutely not. Today we're talking about our rather lovely buddies Raycon, who are sponsoring this part of today's video. You see, Raycon's everyday earbuds are hot, hot, hot. And that's not just because they come in a variety of different colours. See, I've got this rather gorgeous white pair, but they also come in black, red, rose gold, even blue, if you fancy. And you may be thinking, is that the only thing that makes them hot, hot, hot? And I say nay. That would be enough to qualify them for a singular hot, and actually they've got 3. They have optimized gel tips that come in 5 different sizes, so you can get the perfect in-ear fit. The everyday earbuds also have a 32-hour battery life and offer 8 hours of continuous playtime. They're half the price of other premium earbuds. Now, the cynics amongst you may be thinking, this is all too good to be true. How do I trust you, strange internet woman? And that's valid, because at the end of the day, I am just a strange woman on the internet. So instead, I offer you this. Raycon's everyday earbuds have over 50,000 5-star reviews, and they're not all by me, I swear. I also got my mum to do some. So if this is sounding fun or fruity fresh, just go to buyraycon.com/Ellbat or click the link in the description down below if you want to spice things up a little bit and get 15% off your first Raycon purchase. Thank you so much to Raycon for sponsoring this part of today's video, and thank you to you for joining me in the Integration Corner. I'll see you in the next one.
At this point, probably could have done a Google search, got the answers and moved on with my life, but I didn't. Instead, I decided that I would run my own sleep deprivation experiment, naturally. I hear the screams now, mainly from my mother.
Okay, we get it, you're smart. Dr. Sharon Bateman.
There's clearly some concerns here. The first, obviously, being my health. Sleep deprivation, after all, can be incredibly dangerous. But there is an important difference between chronic sleep deprivation and acute sleep deprivation. Chronic sleep deprivation is where you routinely get less sleep than you need for a period of over 3 months. This can have lasting consequences for your health, such as hypertension, an increased likelihood of heart attacks and strokes, decreased ability to regulate hormones, decreased brain function, memory loss, weakened immune system, and even conditions such as depression. Acute deprivation, on the other hand, is a short period of less sleep, usually just a few days, that a person can recover from. It's not harmless, as many of you who've pulled the aforementioned all-nighter will know, but it generally has no significant long-term side effects or health concerns. The main short-term side effects are declined cognitive function, tiredness, and mood swings, which aren't great, objectively, but I was personally comfortable going through those things within the safe, controlled environment of my home during this experiment. I also asked a family friend who is a doctor to routinely monitor me throughout this experiment, and I took my heart rate and blood pressure regularly to just check that my body was doing okay. If there were any health concerns, either from myself or from the doctor, I would end the experiment immediately. The second concern is authenticity, which I don't know if you've been on YouTube long, but clickbait is a hell of a thing. If you search sleep deprivation experiment, you will come across many questionable videos. So I figured that the only way to ensure that people couldn't say that this was faked was to actually live stream the entire thing on twitch.tv/Ellbat. This would allow you guys to come along for the slow descent into chaos, but also allow me to be kept company during what was essentially a very long time to be awake. Now, the final concern was my experimental design. The main focus of this experiment was to monitor my cognitive function the longer that I was awake. Theoretically, the longer I'm awake, the more my cognitive functions should decline. But I needed a way to test this somewhat systematically. So I decided to complete a series of different memory and reaction speed tests called the human benchmark.
This is the human benchmark test. This tests various things like your reaction time, general memory, typing as well, your visual memory, as well as your sequence memory.
I would do these tests every 5 hours for a maximum period of 100 hours. Now, this is not to say I was going to force myself to stay awake for 4 days if I wasn't feeling up to it. I could end the experiment at any time for any reason. It's just to give people an idea of the maximum period of time that I would be willing to stay awake for.
I decided not to consume any caffeine during this experiment because I didn't want to artificially boost my energy levels. I would only stay awake as long as my body felt able to, and I didn't want to give it an artificial boost that then could add strain onto my heart or my body in any way.
The experiment, live on twitch.tv/Ellbat. I started on a high because it was basically just a regular stream at this point. I had set incredibly loud alarms to play anytime anyone interacted with the stream, which I figured would help give me a little jump scare to keep me awake every now and then. But during that first hour, we did our benchmark cognitive function tests. I did pretty poorly on some of these tests because I had never taken any of them before prior to doing them for this experiment, which at the time I thought was an excellent idea, but the smart ones amongst you are probably realising there is a big issue with that.
Memorize the pattern and press the buttons in the order that they light up. Okay. Okay. Is it starting or... Oh, it already started. I missed it. Wait.
My base level results without any sleep deprivation were not as reliable as I had perhaps hoped. For example, I only scored 26 words on my verbal memory, which would end up being the lowest score that I would get for the entire duration of this experiment.
New. Ah, 26 words. That was not very good.
Whilst I scored 12 points on my chimp test, which would end up being the highest I would score throughout this entire experiment. 5 hours later, it was time for our next round of testing, and I actually improved in several categories. The most significant change being on the verbal memory, increasing from 26 words to 85 words. My number memory improved too, from 8 numbers to 11 numbers. From these results, you can probably start to recognize the issue that I kind of alluded to earlier, which I didn't notice at the time, but someone in my Twitch chat actually called it out instantly, and that is the problem of practice. When you practice a given skill, you actually improve over time.
That was higher, I think. I think that one's improved.
Because I had never taken the human benchmark testing before, this meant that the impact of practice from one test to another was going to be significant. Perhaps significant enough to override any impact on my test results as a result of cognitive decline. This potentially risked the entire experiment. I don't know how I didn't realise this was a problem at the time, but it's done now. I've not finished uni, I've not got a degree yet, so we're just gonna chalk this up to general inexperience, and I'm gonna ask for forgiveness. Especially forgiveness from the science community, who is probably cringing, crying and throwing up. Look, I'm trying my best. By the 15-hour mark, I was heading into my first sleepless night, and the Twitch chat played a massive role in helping keep me active and cognitively aware during this time.
Is that pineapple? It is. Guess what, mother? I like pineapple on pizza. So what?
As one hemisphere went to sleep, the other one woke up and kept me company as I went into my 4th round of testing. My typing speed remained fairly consistent, but there were declines in my number memory, chimp test, and aim trainer, although my reaction time was faster, and I scored a 92 on my verbal memory, which was my highest score yet.
92 words. That might be my best one.
The first night wasn't really that bad. As the sun began to rise, my body kind of forgot that it had missed a sleep. This is because the sunlight stopped the production of the hormone melatonin, which is the hormone that controls the sleep-wake cycle. Essentially, as the sun came up, I felt less of a need to go to sleep because there was less melatonin in my body. Jean also woke up around this time, which meant that I had someone to keep me company, which is always helpful when you're trying not to fall asleep.
So your back's nice and straight?
Your back is not even slightly straight.
No.
You're the worst instructor ever.
During the next set of tests though, I did notice shifts in my performance. The chimp test was fast becoming my favourite test and I was consistently scoring highly. My typing speed was also increasing marginally up until this point. However, this marked the start of quite a dramatic decline in my verbal memory. I began to struggle to differentiate between words that I had seen and words that I hadn't. It was all just kind of getting lumped together in one big word soup.
I'm having a bad time right now. Yeah, I knew I'd mess that one up.
This issue with memory recall didn't seem to impact other areas of my memory though, like my number, visual, or sequence memory, as I achieved medium scores in these areas. I also achieved my all-time high score on the AIM trainer during this round of testing, so I'm gonna be really good at FPS games. I occupied most of the second day with gaming to help activate and stimulate my brain. Something worth noting here was that I experienced massively increased hunger, meaning that I was eating a lot and more often as my body was trying to make up for the lack of energy by basically just consuming copious carbohydrates and sugar. I also threw a cold shower in at this point.
30 seconds.
Questionable in terms of how good of an idea that was, but to just explain my rationale a bit here, I have made a video in the past on cold showers and essentially without ruining the video, I ended up really enjoying it and cold showers have a lot of benefit. So I figured that putting one in here would help stimulate my body, it would help wake up my brain, and that isn't what happened at all. Because of my ongoing cognitive decline, I forgot all of the mindfulness and deep breathing tactics that you need to employ to make these showers bearable.
I might be dead.
On the evening of the second day of my sleep deprivation experiment, my mum came over and we conducted a bit of an agony aunt section to the stream, which was essentially where chat wrote in with their dilemmas and I dished out some quite frankly unhinged advice. This section of the stream was when I really started to notice the impact of sleep deprivation on my general brain function. I struggled to formulate sentences well, I would often start them, drift miles away from the point, and then eventually just kind of stop talking because I'd forgotten what I was supposed to be talking about. Because I was struggling to understand a lot of the ideas, I basically ended up giving some very irrelevant advice, and it was probably for the best that this is the moment that my internet decided to cut out. Not ideal when you're trying to conduct a somewhat scientifically sound experiment, but you know what, I'm not a scientist, I'm just a YouTuber. So I don't know what we expected. This second night of sleep deprivation, once my mum had left, was when I really started to feel it. How many hours do we have left? My body felt fatigued, I'd kind of lost some of the energy and enthusiasm I had had previously. I had heavy brain fog, which made it difficult for me to engage with chat. I tried reading a book out loud to stream to try and, you know, get my brain going, and I routinely fumbled my words, and it was not the best, which probably was largely because I was reading a book that was recommended to me on TikTok.
The scent of exotic flowers, fragrant spices, and freshly washed laundry. Whoa, I just had my first visual hallucination.
It was not a very pleasurable reading experience for anyone. I decided to swap to playing a video game instead to help stimulate my brain the best way I could, but this was when something insane happened. I started to experience something called micro-sleeps.
The power of destruction.
Oh, I literally think I just fell asleep for a minute.
Now you may have missed it, but there is a period of just a few seconds where my face goes entirely limp. In these few seconds, I am completely unconscious. I am asleep, but I have no recollection of falling asleep, only of waking up. The sound of the game jolts me awake, and I am visibly confused.
Like, I have no recollection of closing my eyes then. So weird.
I had no idea how long I'd been asleep for or how I'd even fallen asleep in the first place. Now, microsleeps are short periods of just a few seconds where a person goes completely unconscious, and they're usually caused by sleep deprivation. Despite having been awake for longer periods than this in the past, I have never experienced microsleeps before. The level of disorientation that I felt from this microsleep was only increased when chat told me that I hadn't been asleep at all. Which wasn't them trying to do some weird gaslighting, by the way. It was just because the period was so short, it was just a few seconds, that most people had missed it. But because I was really starting to struggle with cognitive function at this point, their denial of my sleep made me question whether or not it had happened at all, or if I was actually just losing it.
I don't know, I fell asleep, like I think I did. I don't know, it was really weird because I don't remember closing my eyes.
It is important to note that this is a key reason why sleep deprivation can be incredibly dangerous, even in the short term. You can't control microsleeps that are caused by sleep deprivation. So imagine you are at work or driving or cooking even. This could put you or others in harm's way. So here is a gentle reminder that sleep deprivation is not a joke. It's not something that you should mess around with for fun, and it's definitely not something you should do without a doctor's supervision in a safe and controlled environment. However, despite these microsleeps, my test scores remained relatively constant, which began to frustrate me.
Sean, can you not?
Yeah, sorry, I'm just putting away. You done with this?
No, I'm not done with that. There's a whole pizza! What are you trying to do?
I came to the realization that either the effect of practice on my test performance was completely outweighing any evidence of the sleep deprivation, or the tests that I had used to monitor and measure my cognitive function were actually inefficient in testing what I wanted to test. Perhaps I wasn't testing the right things. For example, perhaps I should have copied what they did to Randy Gardner and done basic multiplications within a set period of time and measured how many I'd got correct. I'm not 100% sure which one of these it was, or whether it was a combination of both of these factors, but the fact that my test performance wasn't showing the level of cognitive decline that I had expected, or that I was physically feeling, began to really weigh on me, and I started to lose motivation for the experiment.
That might be like the fastest I've ever done it. You see, this doesn't make sense. I don't... Can someone explain to me? I can't even see right now.
And it came in the form of mood swings. Yep, this is around the time where I started to get real bitchy. In fact, I got into such a bad mood that I had to take time away from stream and just sit quietly with my cats, because I was really just no fun Fran, you know? I was a no fun Freddy. I was just not feeling the vibe at this point.
I'm like freaking out a bit about how much I'm falling asleep, because it's really weird. I do not feel good right now.
And by the time hour 40 came around, I had made a decision.
I do feel less despairing than I was. I do think I can make it to the 50, but I don't know about anything beyond that.
Chat was mainly just entertaining themselves as I sat there and did very little. I contributed no words to that game. My apologies, thanks for the carry. It was almost as though setting a fixed endpoint for this stream instead of the kind of loose open goal that I had had prior made me feel worse. Hours felt longer and my brain felt heavier. I don't know if that's a good way to explain it, but I physically felt like my brain had a weight on it. So this was a rough time. I hit an emotional low at this point, and for the first time, this was reflected in my test scores. I got my lowest scores in several categories, including aim trainer and reaction time. My typing speed was also the slowest yet. But as hour 50 approached, my optimism had returned as I realized I would soon be bundled, resting in my bed. So I actually got a bit emotional during this point.
I just feel so emotional. I think it's just because I haven't slept.
I almost cried because I really did just enjoy hanging out with you all for such a long period. It was so fun to talk to people and engage with people and get to spend what felt like quality time with you lot. So thank you if you did come along and join the stream. It really was an experience. The renewed spirits brought new adrenaline and several of my test scores rebounded from their lows. Most notably, my reaction time made the single greatest improvement from one test to the next.
Let's do our final reaction tests. Oh, that was quick. Oh my god. That's not a word. What? My least favourite. 5-7. God, that was a lot. I really tried my absolute best with that. I feel like that took all my energy out of me.
So at the end of the experiment, I compared my benchmark scores without any sleep deprivation and my scores after 50 hours of sleep deprivation. And as you can see, it's not quite as conclusive as we would have hoped. Some of the test scores actually improved, which was very contrary to what we were expecting. But if I put my low scores from my first round of testing down to a lack of familiarity with the test, which is entirely my fault, and the impact of practice has obviously skewed some of the results here. If instead we use my second round of testing and compare those to 50 hours of sleep deprivation, the results are a little bit more obvious. I performed worse overall when I was sleep deprived compared to when I wasn't. Obviously. I hit my overall performance peak exactly in the middle at hour 25, which was a little bit later than I was expecting, but I guess that we can put that down to the impact of practice. It's kind of an extraneous variable that I failed to account for, which may have ultimately skewed all of the results in this experiment, rendering it more or less useless, but I dedicated 50 hours of my life to this video, so I'm still making it. But honestly, I would really love to do it again with some help from people who are a lot smarter than me. So if that is you, and you would like to help me come up with a better experimental design to test sleep deprivation better, please let me know in the comments down below. Give me your advice, give me your tips. This is a call for intelligence, help. After the stream finished, I climbed straight into bed and I slept for 6 hours. I got up, went for a walk.
This is the first time I've been outside in like 2.5, almost 3 days. And I'm experiencing a really weird sense that I'm in a video game, that I'm not attached to my environment, which is weird because I didn't feel like that before I slept. So I had 50 hours, I slept 6 hours, and now I feel like that, which clearly shows that the effects of it haven't worn off yet. And in fact, may have slightly gotten worse in a way, because I don't remember feeling like this before I went to sleep.
And then in a slightly masochistic turn of events, I got back on stream. I just wanted to let the people know that I was fine and functioning okay and alive, because for some reason some people thought this was going to be the end of Ellbat. Can't kill me, I'm too powerful. I streamed for about 2 hours, I went to bed at 10 PM, I slept until 8 AM and woke up the next day feeling absolutely fine. It was as if the whole thing had been a rather hazy dream. If you would like to read more into sleep deprivation, I've left links to the studies I used for research down below. I've also left a spreadsheet of my test results in case you wanted a closer look. On a side note, if you are looking for some ethically sourced, sustainably made garments to keep you cozy this winter, you can shop YDYB in the pinned comment. Stay hydrated, and as always, give my kisses to your mother.